The pen felt heavier than any steel beam Ethan Cole had ever lifted, heavier than grief, heavier than pride, heavier than the last 3 unpaid hospital bills folded in his jacket pocket. Across the polished mahogany table, the lawyer waited without blinking, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and walls lined with portraits of people who had never once wondered how much a child's life could cost. The contract was only 5 pages long, but every sentence felt like a door closing behind him. Marry Vivian Ashford. Move into the Ashford estate. Care for her. Do not question the family. Do not speak to the press. Do not expect love. In return, his son Noah would get the heart surgery he needed before the doctors stopped using words like urgent and started using words like too late. They told Ethan that Vivian had not spoken in over a year. They told him she had been trapped in a wheelchair since the accident. They told him she was unreachable, difficult, broken, and that her family simply wanted someone strong enough to manage her care. But nobody explained why one of the richest families in the state would choose a widowed mechanic with burned hands, a dying son, and nothing to offer except desperation. Ethan looked down at the signature line, and for one terrifying second, he almost walked away. Then he saw Noah's small face in his mind, pale under hospital lights, trying to smile through pain because he didn't want his father to be scared. Some choices are not choices at all. Ethan signed his name, and he had no idea that the silent woman waiting inside that mansion was not broken beyond saving, that her family was hiding a secret darker than the accident, and that one desperate kiss would soon make the whole world believe in impossible things again. By the time Ethan Cole drove through the iron gates of the Ashford estate 2 days later, the signature on that contract still felt fresh enough to bleed. His old pickup rattled over the long gravel drive like it was ashamed to be there, its dented hood and cracked windshield moving between perfect hedges, marble fountains, and ancient oak trees trimmed with the kind of care his own life had never been able to afford. Beside him, Noah sat propped against a pillow, the oxygen tube beneath his nose trembling with each uneven breath. The boy's eyes, too bright in his pale face, stayed fixed on the mansion rising ahead of them like something from a storybook that had forgotten how to be kind. Dad, Noah whispered, fogging the window with a small breath. "Is that a castle?" Ethan tightened his hands around the steering wheel. The burns across his knuckles pulled white. He wanted to say no. He wanted to tell his son that castles were for princes, not for boys who slept beside oxygen tanks and fathers who sold themselves into marriage contracts. But Noah's wonder was so fragile, so stubbornly alive that Ethan could not crush it. "Something like that, buddy," he said. "Just for a little while." Noah smiled faintly, then coughed into his sleeve, and the sound went through Ethan like a saw blade. He slowed the truck near the front steps where 2 stone lions guarded a set of massive doors. A woman in a dark navy suit waited beneath the portico, standing so straight she looked carved out of the same cold stone as the house. Her silver hair was twisted into a knot, her hands folded in front of her face composed into the blank politeness of someone trained never to show surprise, disgust, or pity. Ethan killed the engine. For a second he sat there listening to the tick of the cooling motor and Noah's labored breathing, wishing he could reverse drive back through the gates and pretend this place had never existed. Then Noah's fingers found his sleeve. "You okay, Dad?" Ethan looked at his son, at the child who had already learned to worry about him, and forced a smile. "Yeah, come on, let's meet the dragons." Noah gave a breathy laugh, and that laugh was enough to move Ethan out of the truck. The woman stepped forward as he came around to help Noah down. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I am Margaret Vale, estate administrator. Welcome to Ashford House." Her voice was smooth, careful, and empty of welcome. Ethan lifted Noah, gently settling the boy against his chest before reaching for the small oxygen tank. "This is my son, Noah." Margaret's eyes flicked to the boy, and for the first time her expression faltered. Not much, just a hairline crack in the marble. "The child's medical equipment has been arranged in the East guest room." "He stays near me," Ethan said. Margaret blinked. "The East guest room is prepared according to the family's instructions. Then the family can prepare another room." Ethan's voice stayed low, but something in it made the nearest footman glance down at his shoes. "My son sleeps where I can hear him breathe." Margaret studied him for a long moment, and Ethan saw the first test for what it was. The Ashfords had bought his time. They had not bought his spine. Finally, she inclined her head. "Very well. The adjoining suite will be adjusted."
Thank you, this way.
They followed her inside, and the house swallowed them whole. The entrance hall was larger than the entire fabrication shop where Ethan had worked for 11 years. Black and white marble stretched beneath their feet, polished so brightly it reflected the chandelier above like trapped stars. Portraits lined the walls, old men with hard mouths, pale women with pearls around their throats, children in stiff clothes who looked as though they had been trained never to laugh. Ethan felt every one of them staring at his work boots, his faded jacket, the grease that never fully left the creases of his hands no matter how hard he scrubbed. Noah leaned closer to him. "They look mad," the boy whispered. Ethan almost smiled. Maybe nobody ever gave them cookies. Margaret's mouth twitched before she could stop it, then immediately became severe again. "Miss Ashford is in the conservatory," she said as they moved through a corridor lined with antique mirrors. "You will meet her before being shown to your rooms." Ethan adjusted Noah's weight in his arms. "Does she know we're here?" She was informed. "That's not what I asked." Margaret stopped before a set of glass doors glowing with late afternoon light. For a moment, the professional mask slipped again, and beneath it, Ethan saw something tired. "Miss Ashford has been informed of many things in the past year, Mr. Cole. Very few of them were things she wanted." The words landed heavier than Ethan expected. Before he could answer, Margaret continued, "You should understand something before you go in. Vivian Ashford has not spoken in 14 months. She does not respond well to pressure. She does not enjoy strangers. She did not request this arrangement, and she will not thank you for it." Ethan looked at the glass doors. Beyond them, green leaves pressed against the panes, a garden trapped inside a room. "I didn't come for thanks." "No," Margaret said quietly. "I imagine you didn't." Then she opened the doors. Warm, damp air rolled out, smelling of soil, orchids, and rain that never touched the ground. The conservatory was a glass cathedral filled with plants, palms brushing the ceiling, vines twisting over iron frames, flowers blooming in impossible colors while autumn died outside the windows. In the center of it all, beside a stone fountain that no longer ran, sat Vivian Ashford. The photographs Ethan had seen in the lawyer's office had lied by telling the truth too late. In them, Vivian had been radiant, dark hair shining over one shoulder, sharp green eyes, a smile confident enough to challenge a room full of powerful men. The woman in the wheelchair was thinner, paler, folded into stillness like someone who had been left in the cold too long. Her dark hair hung loose around her face. A blanket covered her legs. Her hands rested motionless in her lap. Her eyes stared past the plants, past the glass, past the world itself. Ethan stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of how loud Noah's oxygen machine sounded in the quiet. "Is she asleep?" Noah whispered. Vivian's eyes moved, not to Ethan, to Noah. The change was tiny, but Ethan saw it because he was a father, and fathers learned to notice small movements that meant everything. Vivian looked at the tube beneath Noah's nose, the tank at Ethan's side, the boy's thin hand clutching his father's jacket. Something shifted in her face. Not softness, exactly. Pain, recognizing pain. Ethan stepped forward slowly. "Miss Ashford," he said, "my name is Ethan Cole. This is Noah." Vivian did not blink. Noah lifted one hand in a weak little wave. "Hi." Still silence. Ethan cleared his throat, hating the stiffness in his own voice. "I know this isn't what you wanted. It's not what I wanted either, but I'm here to help with your care. Medications, transfers, therapy, whatever the schedule says. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I fix engines and weld broken metal for a living, but I learn fast." He swallowed pride, cutting his throat on the way down. "And I need the money for my son's surgery. So I'll do the job right. I won't ask questions you don't want answered. I won't pretend this is something it isn't." Vivian's gaze moved from Noah to Ethan at last. Her eyes were startling up close, not empty the way they had seemed from the doorway, but locked from the inside. A person was still there watching through the ruins. For one impossible second, Ethan thought she might speak. Her lips parted slightly. Noah noticed the orchids beside her wheelchair and whispered, "Are those real?" Vivian's eyes flicked back to him. Noah leaned forward in Ethan's arms, fascinated. "They look like butterflies." Vivian's fingers twitched in her lap. Just once, Margaret noticed it too. Ethan felt the room tighten around that small movement. "Do they smell good?" Noah asked. Vivian did not answer, but her gaze followed him as Ethan lowered the boy carefully onto a cushioned bench near the plants. Noah reached toward one orchid, then stopped and looked at Vivian for permission. "Can I?" The silence stretched. Then Vivian lifted her right hand, slow as a leaf unfolding, and pointed to a different flower, pale purple with a yellow throat. Noah smiled like she had given him a treasure. This one, Vivian blinked once. Yes, Ethan thought. That meant yes. Noah smelled the flower and laughed softly. "It smells fancy." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, something he had not realized he was holding. Margaret looked away, her jaw tight. Vivian turned her face toward the glass wall again, but not before Ethan saw moisture shining in her eyes. That night, after the staff led them through endless hallways to rooms larger than their old apartment, Ethan sat on the edge of Noah's bed and watched his son sleep. The adjoining suite had been prepared quickly, almost too perfectly. Fresh sheets, medical monitors, oxygen supplies, a tray of prescriptions, a small lamp shaped like a moon. Noah looked impossibly small beneath the blankets. Ethan brushed a curl from his forehead and checked the rhythm of his breathing for the 100th time.
"We're going to get you through this," he whispered.
"I don't know how to do any of the rest of it, but I know that." Noah slept on, trusting him in the blind, devastating way children trust the people who love them. Ethan stayed until the monitor numbers steadied, then walked into his own room and closed the door without turning on the light. The bed was enormous. The curtains were heavy. The silence felt expensive and hostile. He pulled the contract copy from his jacket and read the first page again under the glow of his phone. Husband, caregiver, confidentiality, payment upon compliance. The words blurred after a while. He thought of Vivian in the conservatory, trapped among living things, and wondered what kind of family needed to hire a stranger to marry their own daughter. He thought of Margaret's warning. He thought of Vivian's fingers moving toward the orchid. He thought of Noah asking if she was asleep. No, Ethan thought. She wasn't asleep. She was buried. The first week taught him the shape of her prison. Every morning, Margaret handed him a schedule typed with military precision. Medication at 7, breakfast offered at 8, though Vivian never ate more than 3 bites. Passive leg exercises at 10. Chair transfer at noon. Rest at 2. Dinner at 6. Evening medication at 8. Ethan followed the instructions carefully. He learned how to lock the wheelchair, how to support Vivian's shoulders during transfers, how to move her legs through stretches without hurting her. She never thanked him. She rarely looked at him. She communicated with the smallest gestures, a blink, a turn of the head, fingers tightening once for no and twice for yes. But Ethan had spent years working with machines that did not explain themselves. He knew how to listen for resistance, how to feel when something was misaligned, how to wait instead of forcing what was not ready. He noticed things the staff pretended not to notice. Vivian's entire body went rigid whenever her younger brother Vivian Ashford entered the room with his charming smile and restless eyes. Her breathing changed when her father's voice echoed in the hall. She relaxed when Noah sat beside her and talked about dinosaurs, trucks, hospital nurses, and the imaginary dog he wanted when his heart got fixed. At night, long after the house quieted, Ethan sometimes heard the faint hum of Vivian's wheelchair moving toward the conservatory, followed by sounds so soft he could not prove they were crying. He did not follow, not at first. A contract had brought him here, but it had not given him the right to trespass through another person's grief. On the 8th day during morning therapy, the first crack appeared. Noah was sitting on the floor near the exercise mat, building a crooked tower out of foam blocks, while Ethan moved Vivian's left leg through the prescribed range of motion. Vivian stared at the ceiling, her face blank, her hands folded over the blanket. "Dad, look," Noah said. "It's taller than yesterday." "I see it, buddy. Careful with the blue one." Noah placed the blue block on top. The tower swayed, held for one glorious second, then collapsed across the floor. Noah burst into laughter, bright and breathless, and then the laughter turned. The cough came hard, sudden, violent. His small body folded around it. Ethan released Vivian's leg instantly and crossed the mat in 2 strides. "Noah!" He gathered his son carefully, one hand supporting his back, the other reaching for the oxygen. "Easy. In through your nose. Look at me. Slow, buddy. Slow." Noah's face flushed red, then pale. His fingers clawed at Ethan's shirt. Ethan kept his voice calm because panic was a luxury his son could not afford from him. "That's it. You're okay. I've got you." The coughing dragged on for 30 terrible seconds, then loosened. Noah sagged against him, exhausted, tears on his lashes. "Sorry, Dad." Ethan closed his eyes for half a heartbeat. "Nothing to be sorry for. You did good." He kissed the boy's hair, then looked up. Vivian was watching them, not staring through them, not hiding behind the dead stillness of the past year. Watching. Her face had changed completely. The blankness was gone, stripped away by something too raw to control. In her eyes, Ethan saw recognition so deep it hurt. She knew what it meant to be betrayed by your own body. She knew what it meant to be helpless while everyone else tried to be brave around you. Their gazes held across the mat, and for the first time, Ethan did not see a rich woman, a contract wife, a silent patient, or an Ashford. He saw someone drowning quietly in a room full of people who kept calling the water air. Then Vivian looked away, but the moment had already happened. Something living had moved beneath the glass. After that morning, the conservatory no longer felt like a room Ethan was only allowed to enter. It felt like a place where something had begun to breathe again, though neither he nor Vivian dared to name it. The change was almost invisible at first, the kind of change only a desperate father and a woman trained into silence would notice. Vivian still did not speak. She still stared out through the glass for hours, still refused most of her food, still moved through the day like someone performing the minimum duties of being alive. But when Noah entered the room, her eyes followed him sooner. When Ethan approached with her medication, her fingers no longer tightened with immediate rejection. During therapy, she stopped turning her face completely away, and once when Noah proudly showed her a drawing of a dragon with wheels instead of legs, Vivian touched the corner of the paper with one trembling finger as if it were something fragile and sacred. Ethan said nothing about it. He had learned the hard way that some things died when dragged too quickly into the light. So he kept the schedule. He measured pills, checked oxygen levels, lifted Vivian carefully from bed to chair, from chair to therapy mat, from therapy mat back again. He cooked Noah eggs when the estate kitchen sent up food too rich for a sick child's stomach. He fixed a loose hinge on the medical supply cabinet without being asked. He tightened a leaking valve in the conservatory irrigation system because the drip irritated him. Margaret noticed everything. She never praised him, but the next morning the toolbox he had requested appeared outside his door, polished and arranged like an apology. On the 10th day, Ethan found Vivian in the conservatory before dawn. The sky beyond the glass was the color of cold ash, and the estate grounds lay under a skin of silver frost. Vivian sat near the dying section of the room where several plants had begun to brown at the edges, their leaves curling inward like hands giving up. A space heater hummed uselessly near her chair. She had no blanket over her shoulders, and her hands were white with cold. Ethan stopped in the doorway, debating whether to leave. Then Vivian's head turned slightly, not enough to invite him, not enough to dismiss him. It was the closest thing to permission she had ever given. He crossed the room, picked up the folded blanket from the bench, and placed it gently around her shoulders without touching her skin. "You'll freeze before the plants do," he said. She did not react, but she did not shrug the blanket off. Ethan moved to the small preparation counter and began sorting her morning medication. The pills clicked softly in the plastic cup. For a while, that was the only sound. Then, without looking at her, he said, "My wife used to keep plants in every window." The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise Vivian. He had not planned to speak of Lily in this house. His grief belonged to the small apartment, to the box of photographs under his bed, to the old work shirt he could not throw away because it still held the memory of her hands folding it. But in the gray hush before sunrise, with Vivian staring at dying leaves like they had betrayed her personally, the secret came loose. She said plants were honest. If they weren't getting what they needed, they showed you. Too much sun, not enough water, bad soil. People hide it better. He poured water into a glass and set the cup of pills beside it. After she died, I let them all go. Every plant she loved. I told myself I was too busy with Noah, too tired, too broke. But the truth was I hated them for needing me when I could barely stand needing anything myself. Vivian's eyes shifted toward him. Ethan kept his gaze on the pill bottles because looking at her might make him stop. Noah was 2. He couldn't say much yet, but he noticed. One morning I found him dragging a cup from the sink to the window, spilling water all over the floor, trying to save a fern that was already dead. He looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand. Ethan swallowed. The memory still hurt, but softer now, like a scar instead of an open wound. That was the first time I realized grief can make you selfish in ways that look like survival. I had been so busy mourning what was gone that I forgot something was still alive right in front of me. He carried the medication to Vivian and held it out. She took the cup with slow fingers. Her hand trembled once, making the pills rattle. "I'm not telling you this because I think I know what you went through," Ethan said quietly. "I don't. And I'm not asking you to talk or smile or forgive anybody. That's not my place. But I see you sitting with these plants every morning, and I think maybe you know which ones are dying because you feel like they do." Vivian stared at him, and for the first time he saw anger there, sharp and wounded. Good, he thought. Anger was warmer than nothing. "Maybe everyone around you keeps watering the wrong soil," he continued. "Maybe they want you quiet because quiet is easier for them. Maybe they call it peace because they don't have to hear what broke." Vivian's fingers closed around the empty medication cup until it bent slightly. Ethan lowered his voice. "I'm noticing Vivian. That's all. I'm not fixing. I'm not asking. I'm just noticing." He turned and left before either of them could regret what he had said. But later that morning, when Margaret came to collect the breakfast tray, the plate was not untouched. Vivian had eaten half a piece of toast. It was a small thing. In that house, it felt like thunder. The next day, Margaret found Ethan in the garage behind the estate, standing beside his pickup with the hood open more for comfort than necessity. He had been staring at the engine for 20 minutes, hands braced on the frame, breathing in the familiar smell of oil dust and metal. Machines made sense. Engines failed for reasons. Fuel spark compression. A problem could be traced, held repaired. People were different. People could be broken by things no tool could reach. "Miss Ashford wants you," Margaret said from the doorway. Ethan looked up. "Is she all right?" "She is impatient." That was new. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and followed her upstairs to Vivian's room, a place he entered only for caregiving tasks and never without knocking. The room was beautiful, in the way hotel rooms were beautiful, expensive, colorless, and entirely free of personality. Vivian sat by the window in her wheelchair, a closed laptop on the desk beside her, and her phone resting in her lap. When Ethan entered, she pointed to the laptop, then to him. "You want me to open it?" Vivian blinked once. "Yes." He sat at the desk, lifted the screen, and waited while the system loaded. Vivian picked up her phone and typed with slow concentration. A moment later, an automated voice spoke from the device, flat and mechanical. "Conservatory database." Ethan froze. It was the first sentence she had given him, even if it was borrowed from a machine. He looked at her, careful not to show too much reaction. "All right, where do I find it?" She typed again. "Green icon. Password is under desk." Ethan found the paper taped beneath the drawer and logged in. The database opened to a grid of plant names, care notes, temperature ranges, watering schedules, and red warning symbols beside several entries. Vivian rolled closer and pointed at the screen, then typed, "Show distressed specimens." Ethan clicked the filter. 12 plants appeared. Vivian leaned forward, and for the first time since he had known her, her stillness looked like concentration instead of surrender. She typed again, faster now. "Paphiopedilum needs less direct light. Fern is root-bound. Citrus has scale. Soil pH wrong for hydrangea." Ethan stared at the screen, then at her. "You know all this?" Her mouth tightened. She typed, "I studied botany." The machine said the sentence without emotion, but the words carried a before and after that filled the room. Ethan heard what she did not type before the crash, before the chair, before everyone began speaking around her instead of to her, before she became a problem to manage. Then why is the gardener letting them die? Vivian's eyes sharpened. She typed, "Because no one asks me anymore." Ethan felt that one settle deep. "Then we'll ask." She looked at him. He corrected himself. "You'll tell me. I'll translate." The arrangement began that afternoon. They found the gardener, a nervous man named Luis, pruning roses near the south wall. He looked terrified when Ethan pushed Vivian into the conservatory with the laptop balanced across his forearm and her phone in her lap. "Miss Ashford has instructions," Ethan said. Luis glanced at Vivian, then at Ethan, unsure whom he was supposed to obey. Vivian typed, and the machine spoke. "Move the Paphiopedilum to filtered shade. Repot the Boston fern. Treat citrus with horticultural soap. Stop overwatering the anthurium." Luis blinked. "Yes, miss." Vivian typed again. "Also, the misting schedule is wrong." Luis looked as if he had just been scolded by a ghost. Ethan had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from smiling. For the next week, the conservatory became Vivian's battlefield. She still moved through the rest of the house like a shadow, but among the plants, something in her lifted. She reviewed entries each morning, issued instructions through the phone, corrected Latin names when Ethan butchered them, and watched with fierce attention as Luis adjusted soil light and water. Noah adored it. He began calling the room Aunt Vivi's Jungle, a title no one had approved but no one corrected. He sat near her chair with colored pencils, drawing each plant she saved and giving them names like Sir Leafington Princess Dirt and Captain Spiky. Vivian never laughed but once. When Noah held up a cactus wearing a crown, the corner of her mouth moved. Ethan saw it. Margaret saw it. Noah saw it and immediately whispered, "Dad, I think she almost smiled." Vivian turned her head toward the glass, but her ears flushed pink. Then came the question that changed the air. Noah was sitting beside her wheelchair one rainy afternoon watching Luis move a recovering fern into a larger pot. "Aunt Vivi," he asked softly, "if you can fix the plants, do you think you can fix me too?" Ethan, who had been tightening a loose bolt on the irrigation rack, went completely still. The rain tapped against the glass above them. Luis froze with a handful of soil. Vivian's face emptied, but not in the old way. This was shock, pain, helplessness. Noah looked down quickly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make you sad." Vivian's hand moved. Slowly, with effort, she reached toward him and placed her fingers on his small shoulder. The touch was awkward, fragile, and brief, but Noah leaned into it as if it had warmth enough to live on. Vivian picked up her phone with her other hand and typed. The machine spoke. "I cannot fix you, but I can sit with you while you heal." Noah considered this, then nodded solemnly. "That's okay. Dad does that too." Ethan turned away before either of them could see what those words did to him. That night, long after Noah had fallen asleep, Ethan heard the wheelchair in the hallway again. This time, he followed. Not close enough to intrude, just near enough to know if she needed help. The sound led him to the conservatory. The glass room was dark except for the low amber grow lights glowing beneath the leaves. Vivian sat near the orchids, her shoulders shaking. At first, the sound was so quiet he thought she was struggling to breathe. Then he realized she was crying. Not the silent tears he had glimpsed before. These were sobs pulled from somewhere deep and unwilling, breaking through the cage she had built around herself. Ethan stepped inside. Vivian. She stiffened instantly, one hand flying to her phone, but her fingers were trembling too hard to type. "I can go," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't hurt." She shook her head, then nodded, then covered her face as another sob tore through her. Ethan moved closer and knelt beside the wheelchair, careful not to touch her. "Something happened to you," he said quietly. "Not just the accident. Something after. Or before. I don't know. But I know the difference between pain and fear, and this house is full of fear." Vivian's breathing hitched. She typed one word, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. The glow from the phone lit her face from below, showing the wreckage of tears, the fury, the shame that had never belonged to her, but had somehow been placed in her hands to carry. Ethan waited. He had learned waiting from hospital rooms, from welding seams that could not be rushed, from grief that ignored every schedule. Finally, Vivian stopped typing and reached for his wrist. Her hand was cold. Her grip was weak but desperate. She pulled his hand closer, and on the phone screen were 3 words she had managed not to delete. "Don't go. Please." Ethan sat back on his heels, his throat tightening. "I'm not going anywhere." She stared at him as if those words were more frightening than leaving. The phone shook in her hand as she typed again. This time the machine spoke into the warm darkness of the conservatory, each flat syllable carrying a truth that had been buried for 14 months. Damien was driving. Ethan's body went still. Vivian's tears kept falling, but her eyes were dry in a different way now, burning with something that had waited too long to be named. She typed again. He was drunk. The room seemed to tilt around them. Ethan looked through the glass walls toward the dark outline of the estate, the portraits, the chandeliers, the perfect rooms built to hide imperfect things. "Your brother caused the accident," he said slowly. Vivian blinked once. "Yes." Her fingers moved again. "My family covered it up, paid police, paid witnesses, paid doctors, told everyone I was unstable, told me if I spoke I would destroy the family." The automated voice made it sound like a report, but Ethan heard the scream beneath it. His hands curled into fists on his knees. He thought of Damien's smile, the way Vivian locked up whenever he entered, the way everyone in the house treated her silence as a symptom instead of a sentence. "So they didn't just leave you in that chair," he said. "They locked you in it." Vivian closed her eyes, and the truth of it passed through her like another crash. She typed one final message slower than the rest. "If I tell the truth, I destroy them. If I stay quiet, I disappear. So I chose nothing." Ethan looked at this woman who had been called unreachable, difficult, broken, and understood suddenly that she had not been silent because there was nothing inside her. She had been silent because every word had been made into a weapon against her. He leaned closer, voice low and steady. "Listen to me. You are not nothing. You are not their secret. You are not the damage they decided was convenient." Vivian opened her eyes. "You're hurt," Ethan said. "That's different from broken." The words seemed to strike something in her chest. Her face crumpled and she reached for him again, not with elegance or control, but like someone going under for the last time. Ethan did the only thing he knew how to do. He stayed. He sat beside her wheelchair on the conservatory floor while the rain ran down the glass and the plants breathed around them, and for the first time since entering Ashford House, he understood the real contract was not the one he had signed. It was the one forming silently between 2 people who had both been cornered by love, grief, and impossible choices. "I will see you when the world looks away. I will stay when staying costs something. I will not call your prison peace just because everyone else does. The next morning, Ashford House did not look any different, and that somehow made the truth feel even more monstrous. The chandeliers still glittered, the marble still shone. The portraits still stared down from their golden frames as if nothing ugly had ever happened beneath their roof. Breakfast still arrived on silver trays, tea poured into porcelain cups. Staff moved through hallways with lowered eyes, and somewhere in the East Wing, Vivian Ashford slept off another night of expensive whiskey, while the sister he had destroyed sat in a conservatory, learning how to breathe around a secret that no longer belonged only to her. Ethan moved through the day with a quiet rage in his bones. He did not tell Noah. He did not confront Margaret. He did not storm into the dining room and drag Damien out by the collar, though every part of him wanted to. He had spent half his life around fire and steel, and he knew heat was useful only when controlled. Let it flare too fast and it ruined the whole weld. So he watched. He watched the way Margaret's face tightened when Damien's name appeared on the schedule. He watched the way two maids stopped talking when he entered the laundry room. He watched Vivian, who seemed both lighter and more terrified after the confession, as if speaking through a machine had opened a locked door inside her. But behind that door was a hallway filled with ghosts. She did not mention Damien again that morning. She reviewed the conservatory database with fierce concentration, correcting Luis's misting schedule and ordering 3 diseased plants isolated before the fungus spread. But her hands shook when she typed, and once when a car engine sounded in the front drive, her whole body went rigid. Ethan saw it. He set down the watering can, moved closer, and stood beside her chair without saying a word. Vivian looked up at him. He did not touch her. He did not ask if she was okay. He simply stayed within reach until the car passed. That became their new language. Not romance, not yet not anything soft enough to be safe. Presence, witness, a shoulder in the doorway, a hand near the wheelchair brake, a voice telling the staff, Miss Ashford said no visitors today, with enough iron in it that no one argued twice. By the 3rd day after the confession, Vivian began asking Ethan questions through her phone. Small ones at first, as if she were testing whether curiosity still belonged to her. Where did you learn to fix engines? My father's garage, Ethan answered while adjusting the height of her therapy bars. He believed every boy should know 3 things: how to change oil, how to apologize when he was wrong, and how to keep working when he was tired. He was better at teaching the first one than the second. Vivian's mouth moved, almost smiling. Later, while Noah colored beside them, her phone asked, "Did you love your wife?" Ethan's hands paused on the wrench. For a moment, the room became smaller, the air thick with memories of Lily laughing in a sunlit kitchen. Lily asleep with Noah curled against her. Lily's voice saying his name the morning before the aneurysm took her, between one breath and the next. "Yes," he said finally, "I still do. Death doesn't turn love off. It just leaves you holding it with nowhere obvious to put it." Vivian watched him carefully. "Does it hurt less?" the phone asked. Ethan thought about lying, but lies were too common in that house already. "No, it hurts different. At first it was a knife. Now it's more like weather. Some days clear. Some days it comes in hard and I just have to get through it." Vivian looked down at her useless legs beneath the blanket, then typed, "I loved someone before the accident." Ethan waited. "Julian Mercer. He said he would marry me. 2 weeks after I woke up in the hospital, he stopped visiting. He sent flowers instead. Then a letter. He said he could not watch me become less than myself." The phone read the last words in its flat, artificial tone, but Ethan felt the cruelty of them as if someone had placed a live coal in his hand. He was a coward, Ethan said. Vivian's eyes flicked up. Maybe he was honest. No, Ethan said, setting the wrench down. Honesty would have been admitting he didn't know how to love when love got hard. Calling you less than yourself was just cowardice wearing a suit. Vivian stared at him as if no one had ever been angry for her before. Ethan stepped closer, voice lower. "You want to know what staying looks like? It's not poetry. It's not grand speeches. It's sitting on a bathroom floor at 2 in the morning while your kid throws up from medication. It's learning hospital billing codes because one wrong form can cost you a month's rent. It's washing someone's hair when they're too weak to lift their arms. It's showing up when showing up is inconvenient, ugly, exhausting, and unfair. His throat tightened, but he kept going. Anyone can love a person when they're easy to love. That's not the test. Vivian's fingers trembled over her phone. What is? Whether they stay when leaving would be simpler. The words settled between them. Noah looked up from his coloring, sensing something important without understanding it. Dad always stays, he said, even when he's sleepy. Ethan looked away fast, blinking hard. Vivian reached toward Noah and placed her hand gently over his drawing. It was another dragon this time with flowers growing from its wings. That evening, Damien came home drunk. Ethan heard him before he saw him, the careless slam of the front door, the echo of expensive shoes on marble, the slurred laugh thrown at a servant who did not laugh back. Noah was asleep upstairs, feverish but stable. Vivian had been taken to her room after therapy, exhausted from a day of small efforts that would have looked like nothing to anyone who did not understand the cost of surviving. Ethan was in the kitchen heating broth when Damien appeared in the doorway, jacket open, tie loosened, blonde hair falling over one eye in a way that probably charmed people who had never seen what charm could hide. You, Damien said, pointing at Ethan as if naming a stain. The husband. Ethan turned off the stove. She's resting. Damien smiled. I didn't ask. He stepped farther into the kitchen, reeking of whiskey and cologne. Where is my sister? Resting, Ethan repeated. And she doesn't want visitors. Damien's smile thinned. Vivian doesn't want anything. That's sort of the point. The words moved through Ethan like a match dropped into gasoline. He stepped in front of the doorway before Damien could pass. Not tonight. Damien blinked, then laughed. You're kidding. No. Do you know who owns this house? Not the man standing in front of me. Damien's eyes sharpened. Careful mechanic. My family picked you out of a hole because you were useful and desperate. Don't mistake a contract for authority. Ethan held his ground. And don't mistake money for a spine. For 1 second, Damien's face went slack with shock. Then rage flushed up his neck. What did she tell you? Ethan said nothing. Damien leaned closer, voice dropping. Whatever story she typed into that little phone, remember this. Vivian has not been well since the accident. She confuses things, blames people, creates fantasies because she cannot accept what happened to her. Ethan studied him, the unsteady stance, the glassy eyes, the practiced cruelty. You mean she remembers? Damien's mouth twitched. There it was, fear, quick and ugly. This is family business. Then maybe her family should have protected her instead of burying her alive. Damien moved fast, shoving Ethan's shoulder. It was a mistake. Ethan did not swing. He simply caught Damien's wrist, turned it, and walked him backward until the younger man hit the pantry door with a hollow thud. Listen to me, Ethan said quietly. You are drunk. You are loud. My son is sleeping upstairs. Vivian is not seeing you. And if you ever put your hands on me again, I will forget how much this house pays me. Damien's breath came hard through his nose. My father will hear about this. Good, Ethan said. Tell him I said Vivian is done being afraid of men who need lawyers to sleep at night. Damien yanked free and stumbled away, cursing down the hall. Ethan stood still until the front door slammed again. Only then did he notice Margaret standing near the service entrance, one hand pressed to her mouth. She lowered it slowly. You shouldn't have done that, she whispered. No, Ethan said, picking up the broth. Someone should have done it 14 months ago. Margaret's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back before they fell. She heard Margaret said. Ethan looked toward the stairs. Through the room monitor, she heard all of it. When Ethan reached Vivian's room, the lights were low. She sat near the window phone, already in her lap, face pale but awake. The message was typed before he entered. You didn't have to fight him. Ethan set the broth on the table. I didn't fight him. You know what I mean. He pulled a chair close, but not too close. Yes, I did. Her hands moved quickly. This is not your war. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, at the woman who had spent more than a year believing that being alone was safer than being disappointed again. When I signed that contract, I told myself I was doing it for Noah. And I was. I would sign it again if it meant giving him a chance. But that paper made me your husband in name, and maybe that started as a lie. Maybe it started as a transaction, but I still gave my word that I would care for you. Vivian's eyes shone in the dim room. You are paid to care. The money is why I came here, Ethan said. It is not why I stayed outside that conservatory door last night. It is not why I stood between you and Damien. And it is not why I am sitting here now when my hands are itching to pack Noah into my truck and drive until this house disappears. Vivian stared at him, and the silence between them trembled. She typed slowly, Why are you still here? Ethan's answer came before he could soften it. Because somebody has to be. She closed her eyes and the tears escaped anyway. Silent at first, then heavier. Ethan did not reach for her until she reached for him. Her hand found his wrist the same way it had in the conservatory, but this time the grip was not only desperation, it was choice. I think about giving up the phone, said after a long pause, her fingers shaking as she typed. Every day. My father wants me to sign the settlement, take the money, sign the permanent NDA, disappear quietly. He calls it protecting the family, but it feels like agreeing that I deserve to be erased. Ethan leaned forward, anger steady now, no longer fire but forged steel. Then don't sign. Vivian's laugh came without sound, bitter and exhausted. It is not that easy. No, Ethan said, but it is that simple. She looked at him. They will destroy me. They already tried. They will say I am unstable. Then we prove you're not. They will say I am bitter. You are. You're allowed to be. That startled her. Ethan's voice gentled. Vivian, you keep thinking the choices are destroy your family or destroy yourself. There is a third choice. Tell the truth and let the people who did wrong carry the weight of what they did. Her breathing grew uneven. That is not destruction. That is consequence. Vivian looked down at her phone, then at her legs, then at the dark window reflecting both of them. The silent heiress in the chair and the widowed mechanic sitting beside her like he had always been meant to find that room. Her fingers moved again. I don't know how to be brave anymore. Ethan thought of Noah's hospital bed, Lily's empty side of the closet, the contract in his jacket. Every morning he had woken afraid and worked anyway. Brave is not how you feel, he said. It's what you do while you're scared. She cried then, not because she was weak, but because some truths hurt when they first enter the body. Ethan stayed until the broth went cold. The next morning, Vivian asked for a lawyer. Not the Ashford family attorney, not the polished man who had handed Ethan the marriage contract with clean hands and dead eyes. She wanted Helena Marlowe, the independent attorney who had briefly represented her after the crash before the Ashfords buried the case under settlements and threats. It took Margaret 2 days to find her number, and when she did, she handed it to Ethan, folded inside a napkin, while pretending to refill coffee. I never knew how to help her, Margaret murmured. Ethan took the paper. You're helping now. Helena Marlowe arrived 3 days later in a raincoat, with gray curls escaping a loose bun and a leather briefcase scuffed at the corners. She did not look rich enough for Ashford House, which made Ethan trust her immediately. Vivian waited in the conservatory dressed carefully for the first time since Ethan had arrived. Her hair brushed a wool blanket over her knees, her phone in her lap like a weapon. Helena sat across from her and spoke directly to Vivian, not to Ethan, not to Margaret, not around her. Miss Ashford, she said, I understand you requested this meeting, Vivian typed. The automated voice filled the glass room. I want to void the NDA. I want to testify about the accident. I want Damien held accountable. Helena's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened. That will be difficult, Vivian typed faster. I am done choosing easy things that keep me silent. Helena leaned back slowly. Your family will attack your credibility. They will argue trauma affected your memory. They may attempt to prove you are mentally unfit. They already treat me as if I am dead, Vivian typed. Let them prove I am alive. Ethan felt pride rise in him so hard it hurt. Helena looked from Vivian to Ethan, then back again. Once we begin, there is no comfortable way back. Vivian's fingers hovered over the phone for only a moment. Good, the machine said. I have lived too long going backward. And with that, the house began to turn against them. Mr. Ashford arrived the next day with 2 lawyers and a face like a locked vault. Damien stopped smiling in the hallways. Vivian's mother cried outside her bedroom door about reputation forgiveness and family blood, never once saying justice. Bank accounts were frozen. Medical privileges were threatened. Staff were warned not to cooperate. But small rebellions bloomed in the cracks. Margaret produced copies of visitor logs. Luis remembered Damien's drunken arrival the night of the crash. A retired driver agreed to speak with Helena. Documents the Ashfords thought destroyed began to surface like bones after a flood. Through it all, Noah's surgery date moved closer. The calendar on Ethan's phone became a countdown he could not look at without feeling his chest tighten. One night, while Ethan tucked him in, Noah asked, "If I go to sleep for the operation and something happens, will you still take care of Aunt Vivi?" Ethan's heart stopped. Nothing is going to happen to you, but if it does... Noah's eyes were too calm, too old for 7. She needs you. Not like I need you, but kind of. Ethan sat beside him, barely breathing. Buddy. Promise, Noah whispered. Ethan took his son's small hand and held it like a prayer. I promise. Later, he found Vivian in the conservatory, looking out at the November garden where frost had killed the last flowers. Her phone glowed in her lap. I heard him. Ethan closed his eyes. He shouldn't have to think about things like that. Neither should you. He gave a tired laugh. No one asked us. Vivian reached for him, and this time he took her hand without waiting for permission. It was cold, but it held on. Outside, winter pressed against the glass. Inside, among the plants they had fought to keep alive, Ethan and Vivian sat together in the fragile space before everything would either break or begin. Do you think spring always comes? Her phone asked softly. Ethan looked at the sleeping house, the dying garden, the woman beside him, and the hallway upstairs where his son was breathing through another uncertain night. No, he said honestly. I think sometimes we have to plant it ourselves. Vivian looked at their joined hands, then squeezed his fingers once. Yes. The night before Noah's surgery, Ethan did not sleep at all. He tried. He lay on the edge of the enormous guest bed with his boots still on and his hands folded over his chest like a man waiting for bad news. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw hospital lights, white sheets, machines breathing for his son, and doctors speaking in careful voices that meant they were protecting him from the worst. At midnight, he checked Noah's oxygen. At 1, he checked again. At 2, Noah stirred, opened his eyes, and whispered, "Dad, are you scared?" Ethan sat beside him and smoothed the curls from his damp forehead. He had lied to his son 1,000 gentle times, lied about bills, lied about his own hunger, lied about how tired he was, lied because childhood deserved a roof made of something softer than truth. But tonight, with surgery waiting only hours away, he could not force another lie past his teeth. "Yeah, buddy," he whispered. "I'm scared." Noah reached for his hand with fingers too small to carry so much faith. Me too. Ethan bent over him, pressing his lips to his son's knuckles. "Then we'll be scared together." Noah seemed satisfied with that, as if together was stronger than brave, and drifted back into a fragile sleep. Ethan stayed until the numbers on the monitor steadied, then left the room before the pressure inside his chest broke him open. He found himself walking without deciding where down the dark corridor, past sleeping portraits, past locked rooms full of secrets, until the warm breath of the conservatory touched his face. The grow lights glowed low and amber among the leaves, making the glass room look like a hidden world beneath the ocean. Vivian was there. Of course she was there. Her wheelchair stood near the orchids they had saved first, the ones Noah said looked like butterflies. She had a blanket around her shoulders and her phone in her lap, but she was not typing. She was staring at the plants as if asking them how living things endured being cut back, repotted, uprooted, and still found a way to bloom. Ethan stopped behind her. "You should be resting." Vivian's shoulders moved with a breath that shuddered on the way out. Then she turned her head, and in the dim light he saw tears on her face. He stepped forward, alarmed. "Vivian." Her lips parted. No phone, no machine, no borrowed voice, just the torn, unused sound of her own breath becoming words. "Ethan." He froze. The name was so soft he might have thought he imagined it, except Vivian was looking straight at him, terrified and trembling, and her hand had risen to her throat, as if even she could not believe what had escaped. "Say it again," he whispered, barely able to breathe. A sob broke through her. "Ethan." He dropped to his knees beside the chair, his hands hovering near her but not touching until she reached for him first. Her fingers clutched his shirt with desperate strength.
"I'm scared,"
she said, voice raw, broken, beautiful. "I'm so scared for Noah, for you, for me, for what happens if he doesn't—" "Don't," Ethan said, but his own voice cracked. "Don't finish that." "I couldn't let him go into that hospital without hearing me," she whispered. "I couldn't let you sit there tomorrow and think you were alone. I have been silent so long I forgot my voice was still mine. And then tonight I kept thinking about Noah asking you to stay, and I thought, what if I never say thank you? What if fear keeps stealing everything from me until there's nothing left?" Ethan's eyes burned. He cupped her face in his scarred hands, his thumbs catching tears that kept falling. "You're talking," he said like a prayer. "Vivian, you're talking." "Because you stayed," she breathed. "Because you saw me when I couldn't stand being seen. Because you didn't call my silence peace. Because you made me remember I was still here." Something inside Ethan, something held together by grief, fear, exhaustion, and love, finally gave way. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was not a perfect kiss. It was not gentle in the way stories pretend first kisses are gentle. It was desperate, trembling, full of salt and breath and months of words they had not known how to say. It was his fear for Noah, her terror of the truth, Lily's ghost, Damien's cruelty, every hospital bill, every night in the conservatory, every time two broken people had chosen not to leave. Vivian made a small sound against his mouth and gripped his shirt tighter. Then her body jerked. Ethan pulled back at once. "Did I hurt you?" Vivian was staring down at her legs. Beneath the blanket, her right foot shifted against the wheelchair rest. At first, Ethan thought it was a spasm, one of the involuntary movements the doctors had dismissed months ago. Then it happened again, slower, deliberate. Her toes curled inside her slipper, her ankle flexed. Vivian stopped breathing. Ethan stared, unable to understand what his eyes were telling him. "Try again," he whispered. Vivian's face crumpled with concentration and terror. Her left knee trembled, then bent a fraction beneath the blanket. She gasped, both hands flying to the arms of the chair. "I can feel it," she said, the words breaking apart. "Ethan, I can feel my feet." They called the doctor before dawn. By 5 in the morning, the conservatory had become a place of stunned urgency. Medical bags open on the floor. Margaret standing near the door with one hand pressed to her mouth. Vivian crying and laughing through tests she could barely perform. Ethan watching from a few steps away because part of him still feared that if he moved, the miracle would vanish. The neurologist arrived skeptical and left shaken. He spoke of trauma responses, conversion paralysis, neural pathways that had never been fully severed but had locked themselves away after the accident, the mind protecting the body so fiercely it had built a prison out of survival. "This is not a complete recovery," he warned, though his voice trembled with wonder. "She will need intensive therapy. There will be setbacks, pain, fatigue. We cannot promise how far function will return." Vivian looked at Ethan, her voice hoarse but steady. I don't need promises. I need a start. 6 hours later, Ethan was in a hospital waiting room with his son behind surgical doors, and Vivian beside him in her wheelchair, one hand gripping his so tightly their bones pressed together. Her legs were wrapped in braces now, her body exhausted from the night's shock, but she refused to stay behind. "He heard me before they took him in," she whispered. He smiled. Ethan stared at the floor, afraid that if he looked up he would fall apart in front of everyone. "He loves you." "I love him too," Vivian said, and the words were simple, impossible, and true. The surgery lasted 11 hours. 11 hours of coffee gone cold. Prayers Ethan had forgotten how to say. Margaret calling from the estate with updates from Helena. Vivian telling him stories about plants that survived fire, frost, drought, and careless hands. When Ethan paced, she watched him. When he sat, she held his hand. When his fear turned sharp enough to make him silent, she said, "Hope is not knowing everything will be fine. Hope is staying open to the possibility that it can be." And when the surgeon finally came out, mask pulled down, eyes tired but smiling, Ethan stood so fast the chair slammed backward. "The repair was successful," the surgeon said. "Noah is stable. He has a long recovery ahead, but his prognosis is excellent." Ethan did not remember sitting down. He only remembered the sound that left him half sob, half laugh, as the terror that had lived in his body for months finally loosened its grip. Vivian reached for him and he folded forward into her arms, careful and not careful at all, shaking, while she held him with all the strength she had. "He's okay," she whispered into his hair. "He's okay. He's okay." Later, when they let him see Noah, Ethan stood beside the hospital bed and watched his son breathe with a heart that had been mended by hands he would never stop thanking. Noah was pale, tiny beneath the blankets surrounded by wires and monitors, but alive. Alive! Vivian waited at the doorway, not allowed inside, yet moving her toes slowly beneath the blanket, as if reminding herself that impossible things sometimes began smaller than anyone expected. Ethan looked back at her and she smiled, tired and radiant. 4 months later, Vivian spoke in court with her own voice. Damien sat 3 rows behind a table full of lawyers, pale and furious, while Vivian described the crash. The smell of alcohol on his breath. The family meetings. The threats the doctors paid to doubt her memory. The papers pushed toward her when she could not even say no. Helena guided her carefully. Margaret testified with documents hidden for over a year. Luis confirmed what he had seen. And one by one, the walls the Ashfords had built around the truth began to crack. Justice was not perfect. Wealth softened Damien's fall. It always had. He lost his license, faced probation, public disgrace, restitution, and a record the family could no longer polish clean. But Vivian's truth was no longer trapped in her body. It lived in transcripts, headlines, sworn statements, and in the sound of her own voice refusing to apologize. Her father offered money afterward. Her mother offered tears. Vivian accepted neither. "I am not coming back to that house to become your forgiveness," she told them, standing between parallel bars during therapy, sweat on her brow. Ethan's hands ready but not touching unless she needed him. "I am building something else." And she did. Healing was not a straight road. Some mornings her legs shook too badly to hold her. Some afternoons pain sent her back to the chair in tears. Some nights memories dragged her out of sleep, and Ethan sat beside her until the room remembered safety. But progress came stubborn as spring. 3 steps without support, then 10, then the length of the therapy room. Then, 8 months after the kiss in the conservatory, Vivian climbed the stairs of her new little house on the edge of town, one hand on the railing, Ethan behind her, Noah cheering from below with a paper crown he had made that said, "Queen of Stairs." At the top, Vivian laughed and cried at once. Noah healed too, slowly, loudly, beautifully. He returned to school with a scar down his chest and a backpack full of dinosaur stickers. He ran farther every week. He laughed without coughing. The first time Ethan saw him sprint across a playground and keep going, He had to turn away and pretend to check his phone because gratitude had become too large for his body. The contract expired quietly, a document no longer strong enough to name what they were. Ethan and Noah moved out of Ashford House. Vivian sold most of what her family had given her and bought a modest craftsman home with crooked floors, warm windows, and enough land for a garden. In late spring, she invited them to dinner, and Ethan found her outside with soil under her fingernails, planting tomatoes beside raised beds filled with herbs, orchids, and stubborn little perennials. "I'm finishing my degree," she said while Noah chased fireflies near the fence. "Botany, rehabilitation gardens eventually, a place for people who think they are ruined to learn they are still growing." Ethan knelt beside her and pressed soil around a seedling.
Sounds like you'll need someone who can build things.
Vivian looked at him, sunlight caught in her dark hair, legs folded beneath her carefully but freely. "I was hoping you knew someone." He smiled, but his throat tightened because he understood what she was really asking. Not for rescue, not for repayment. For a life built together by choice, not contract. "I might." Noah came running back with a glass jar glowing with fireflies. "Make wishes," he demanded. "We have 12 lights. That means 12 wishes." "What's yours?" Ethan asked. Noah looked at him as if the answer was obvious. "That we stay together. All of us." Vivian reached for Ethan's hand, not because she needed balance, but because she wanted connection. "Done," she said softly. That night after dinner burned a little after Noah spilled lemonade, after Vivian laughed so hard she had to sit down, they released the fireflies into the dark. The tiny lights rose over the garden, drifting into the warm spring air like pieces of impossible hope. Ethan kissed Vivian then, slow and certain, not out of fear, not out of desperation, but as a promise chosen in the open. Noah groaned and cheered at the same time, covering his eyes with both hands and peeking through his fingers. They walked inside together afterward. Walked, all three of them. There would still be hard days, follow-up appointments, court papers, weak legs, scary fevers, old grief, new fears. But there would also be breakfast at a messy table, homework under warm lamps, seedlings pushing through soil, and a house where nobody had to be silent to be loved. Ethan closed the door behind them, shutting out the dark and keeping the light in. And for the first time in years, none of them felt like they were surviving someone else's story. They were home.